My name is Laine Kowalski, and I am 34 years old. I've been a licensed electrician for 11 years. Not because I fell into it by accident, not because I couldn't get into university, not because I had no other options. I chose this trade because I am exceptionally good at it, because the money is honest and substantial, and because there is a particular satisfaction in walking into a building and knowing that every light that turns on, every outlet that holds a charge, every panel that hums quietly behind a utility room door, I did that. My hands carry the proof. There are small burns on my left index finger from a job in Sudbury 3 winters ago. My knuckles are scarred in ways that don't fully fade anymore. I've worked in temperatures that dropped to -28 and in attics that hit 40 in August. I have never once been embarrassed by any of it. Not until my brother made me feel like I should be. It was a Thursday evening in late November when my sister-in-law called. I was still in my truck outside a commercial site in Mississauga, eating a sandwich I'd packed at 5 in the morning because I hadn't had a break since 7. My phone buzzed with her name on the screen, and I picked up expecting nothing unusual. We weren't close, my brother's wife and I, but we were cordial. Holiday text cordial. The kind of relationship where you hug at Christmas and mean it just enough. She didn't ease into it. That was the first sign something was off. "I'm calling because your brother asked me to," she said. He thought it would go over better coming from me. I put down my sandwich. My brother, I'll call him by what he is, which is the person who was supposed to be in my corner, had decided apparently that I should not come to the family Christmas dinner this year. Not because of anything I'd done. Not because of any conflict or history or falling out. But because he was bringing someone. A woman he'd been seeing for 4 months, serious enough that he wanted to introduce her to the whole family at once. And he was worried. His words, as relayed by his wife, that my job would create an awkward dynamic. She actually used the phrase awkward dynamic. I asked her to explain what that meant. She paused for a long time. Then she said that my brother felt his girlfriend came from a certain kind of background, professional, white collar, and that he didn't want the first impression to be. She paused again here, searching for the word. Complicated. Complicated. I sat in my truck in the dark of a Mississauga parking lot in November, and I let that word land. I have a Red Seal certification. I've completed over 9,000 hours of apprenticeship. I run my own crew of 4. I own my truck outright, and I pay my mortgage on a semi-detached in Hamilton without any help from anyone. Last year, my gross income was just under $111,000. My brother, who manages inventory for a mid-size retail chain, makes 64. I know this because he told me 2 Christmases ago in a tone that implied he expected me to be impressed. None of that is what I said on the phone. What I said was, "I understand," and I meant it completely differently than she thought I did. After I hung up, I sat there for another 20 minutes. The parking lot was mostly empty. A Tim Hortons sign buzzed red across the street, and I watched it for a while. Just to have something to look at that wasn't the inside of my own head. I didn't call anyone that night. Not my friend Bia, who would have driven to my brother's house immediately and said things that couldn't be unsaid. Not my coworker Darren, who is 6'3" and protective in the way that large, quiet men sometimes are. I sat with it. I let myself feel what it actually was, which was humiliating in the specific and personal way that only family can manage. Anyone else telling me my work was something to hide would have rolled off me. My own brother was a different thing entirely. What nobody in my family knew, because I hadn't told them yet, was that 2 weeks earlier I had been awarded the electrical subcontract on a mixed-use development project in the East End of Toronto. It was the largest contract of my career. 18 months of work, a crew that would expand to 12 at peak, and a total value, my portion alone, of just over $2.3 million. I'd been waiting to announce it properly. I'd been planning to bring the paperwork to Christmas dinner, to tell everyone over my aunt's pierogies and my mother's beet salad, to watch my father's face when I said the number out loud. My brother had taken that moment away from me. So I decided to let Christmas happen without me and see what 5 days would teach him. Christmas came and went. I spent it at home, which was quieter than it sounds. My friend Bia invited me to her family's place in Ancaster, and I declined, not because I was sulking, but because I genuinely needed the stillness. I cooked a proper meal. Roast chicken, roasted root vegetables, a butter tart from the bakery down the street, because I wasn't going to let my brother ruin my appetite for the holidays. I ate at my own kitchen table in my own house, and I thought about how much work it had taken to have both of those things, the table and the house, and how neither of them had come from anyone's charity or anyone's opinion of what my work was worth. It was peaceful in a way I hadn't anticipated. clarifying almost. What I didn't know was what was happening across town while I was sitting in that quiet. My brother's girlfriend's name was Petra. Wait, no, her name was Maren Okafor. 29 years old, born in Ottawa, raised partly in Vancouver. Her mother was a civil engineer who'd spent 15 years working on federal infrastructure projects in British Columbia before moving to Ontario to consult. Her father had started as an electrician, a Red Seal electrician, before building an electrical contracting company that now employed over 200 people across 3 provinces. Her older brother was currently finishing a mechanical engineering degree at Waterloo. Trades and technical work weren't foreign to Maren's world. They were the foundation of it. So when my brother, at some point during Christmas dinner, made a passing comment about how his family was all very professionally driven, office-oriented people, Maren had smiled and asked about siblings. My brother said he had one sister. Maren asked what I did. My brother said I worked in the trades. In the tone my mother told me later that you might use to say someone had bounced a check, Maren put down her fork and asked what kind of trades. My brother said electrical, he thought. Maren asked if I was licensed. My brother said yes, he assumed so. Maren asked if I ran my own crew or worked under someone. My brother said he wasn't really sure of the details. Maren asked why I wasn't at dinner. And that's when my mother, who had been quiet through all of this, and who I do not entirely blame because she is 71 and hates confrontation the way some people hate heights, made the mistake of telling the truth. She said that my brother had felt it might be awkward, given the circumstances. The table went quiet. Maren looked at my brother for a long moment, not with anger, with something more unsettling than anger, with the careful, calibrating look of someone who is doing math in their head and arriving at a number they didn't expect. She said quietly, and without any theater in her voice, that she found that genuinely confusing. That in her family, the people who worked with their hands were the most respected people at any table. That her father had started pulling wire at 17 and now signed paychecks for 230 employees across Alberta, Ontario, and BC. She said that she would have loved to meet my brother's sister. She said she found it strange that his instinct had been to hide her. My brother tried to recover. He laughed and said he'd just thought it might be a different kind of conversation, that he hadn't meant anything by it. Maren said she'd like to be the judge of that as herself. It didn't end the dinner. But my mother described the rest of it as, like trying to talk in a room where someone had left a window open in January. Everyone could feel the cold, but nobody wanted to be the one to say it. 5 days later, on the morning of the 30th, I heard a knock at my door. I opened it to find my brother, my mother, and my father standing on my front step in the gray Hamilton winter. My mother looked like she hadn't slept properly. My father looked like a man who had been given a task he hadn't signed up for, but was going to complete out of sheer stubbornness. My brother looked like someone who had spent 5 days arguing with a version of himself he didn't particularly like, and had finally reluctantly lost. I let them in. I put the kettle on because I was raised a certain way, and that doesn't stop applying just because someone has made you feel worthless. My mother talked first. She explained about Maren, about the dinner, about what had been said and how it had landed. She got through most of it before her voice started breaking, and I handed her a paper towel because I'd run out of proper tissues. My father sat with his hands around his mug and looked at the table. My brother stared at the floor. I heard about the contract, he said finally. I waited. Darren posted something, tagged your company account. He looked up. Laine. $2 million? 2.3, I said. It went up after the scope revision. The silence that followed was one of the most satisfying silences of my adult life, and I say that with zero apology. My father cleared his throat and said he was proud of me. I thanked him and told him, calmly and without raising my voice, that it would have meant more to hear that, before I'd been asked to stay home from Christmas. It's like something the family needed to keep in a closet. My mother started crying properly at that. I didn't try to stop her. Some things need to be felt before they can be resolved, and my mother had spent 5 days carrying the knowledge of what she'd allowed to happen without pushing back. That has its own weight. My brother's apology was imperfect. I want to be honest about that because I think people deserve honesty about these things more than they deserve a tidy version. He apologized, but there was explanation tangled up in the apology. There was context and justification and a little too much I didn't really mean it energy. But there was also something genuine underneath all of that. Something that looked like a man confronting a part of himself he didn't want to look at directly. I accepted it. Not for his sake entirely. For mine. because the alternative was carrying that particular weight indefinitely, and I do enough physical labor in a week without adding that on top. What nobody said out loud, but what everyone in that kitchen understood, was the precise shape of the irony. My brother had been ashamed of my work. He had wanted to hide me from the one person whose respect he most wanted to earn, and that person had grown up watching her father come home with calloused hands and wire burns on his forearms, and had understood from childhood that the people who build things are not the people you hide. They are the people you bring to the table first. He tried to protect his image by erasing me. What he actually did was tell Marin exactly who he was. 2 weeks after that, Marin reached out to me directly. She'd gotten my number through my brother, which I thought showed a certain straightforwardness I respected. We met for coffee at a place near my site in East Toronto, and we talked for nearly 3 hours. She told me about growing up, watching her father build his company from a 2-person operation in a rented unit in Canada. About the years when money was tight, and her parents drove the same truck for 11 years, because every surplus dollar went back into the business. She told me about the pride she'd felt watching him sign the lease on their current headquarters, a proper building with their name on it. I told her about my first solo job, a basement panel upgrade in a bungalow in Stony Creek. I was 23. The homeowner was an older woman named something I've since forgotten, who stood in the doorway the entire time watching me work. Not because she didn't trust me, she told me after, but because she'd never seen a young woman do that kind of work before, and she found it interesting. When I finished and flipped the breakers and every light in that basement came on clean, she made me tea and told me I should be proud of myself. I've carried that with me ever since. Marin and I exchanged numbers before we left. Real ones, not polite ones. My brother is still with her. From what I can see, they're navigating something real, which requires him to do some work on himself that I think he is actually slowly doing. That's his business, and I choose to wish him well in it. What I didn't anticipate was what happened 6 weeks after that coffee. Marin's father, whose name is Emmanuel Okafor, and who built his company from a rented unit in Canada to a 3-province operation over 22 years, called my work number on a Tuesday afternoon. He had heard about the Toronto project through industry contacts. The electrical subcontracting world in Ontario is not as large as people think, and he wanted to talk about a potential partnership on a federal infrastructure tender his company was pursuing this spring. A project in the $8 to $10 million range, the kind of project that changes the scale of what you're able to do next. We talked for 40 minutes. He asked precise questions. I gave precise answers. At the end of the call, he said he'd be in touch, and 2 days later he was. I am still wearing the same steel-toed boots I wore to that Mississauga parking lot in November. I still come home with dust in my hair and the smell of a long day on my jacket. My hands are the same hands they've always been, marked by the work in ways that don't wash out. My brother tried to make me invisible because he thought that was the only way to protect what he wanted. Instead, he put me exactly where I needed to be.